So I really want you to help me welcome Mariela Rovito, who is the co-founder and CEO of Eberjey. Am I saying it right?
Perfectly.
Yep. And what are they? They're a luxe brand of loungewear, and it has scaled now nationally. Like I see it in all the top stores, but I think it's going international too. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, and you can tell us more about that. So I really want you to give a big hand to Mariela, please. Because this thing keeps moving, because we have been working to try. Thank you so much. Thank you. How does this work? Okay. We have been working to bring her on for a couple of years now. This is good. Okay. So I'd like to start with a video about Eberjey, but I'm worried that I'm going to be in the way and I'm going to have to get off and get on this chair again. Are you going to put it over here? Okay. So let's watch this and you'll see what we're talking about. Am I in the way?
My Eberjey pajamas always makes me feel chic, comfortable, but as a fashion-obsessed mom, I think chic always comes first for me.
I think it certainly sets the mood and for the style, the looks, the quality, and I really want to talk a lot about that. But could you take us a little bit, Mariela, back to before Eberjey and how it came about?
Sure. Wow, that's loud. Okay.
It sounds.
Yeah. Thank you, Adela, for having me here today. It's truly an honor to be here with all of you. So I'll take you back. So first of all, my co-founder and I started this company when we were 23 years old. I like to joke, because it's our 30th year, but I like to joke that we really started it when we were 10. But no, we actually started when we were 23. But way before we were, just young women out of college, I always wanted to start a business. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And, I can go back to the early days of being 8, 9, 10 years old. I used to go to my friends' houses and they used to play with dolls. And when they used to come to my house, I would set up a little store in my room and I would give them a little basket and they could go, shopping. And then they would come and I would, write a little handwritten receipt. And I had one of those credit card machines, old school, that it was like, shoo, shoo. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? With the carbon copies. And that sound was like magic to me. And it wasn't because of the money. It wasn't like I was trying to, save money to buy a special toy or something like that. It was never really about the money. It was actually just about the joy of commerce, of business. I just always liked it. I would go, door to door back in the day selling God knows what, probably my sticker collection or, whatever I had when I was 10 years old. And I always just was thinking of business ideas and, what I could do. So much so that in my first job out of college, I had already told my boss that I was leaving and I was going to go start a business. I was researching at the time, a bunch of business ideas, different things, different industries, and I so happened to meet my co-founder, Allie, at this job, and it was amazing. She had this idea, and I wanted to start a business, so I was just like, ding, let's go. And she was like, wow. Really? You'll do this with me? And I was like, yeah. What's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work, we'll go back and we'll get another corporate job. We were so young. But that never happened. And here we are, 30 years later, no design school, no business school, started the business with $20,000 and never raised money. So true, bootstrapped business story, and here we are.
It's amazing. And such beautiful product too. And so what was it about what she created that you thought I know you wanted a business, but you had to think you could sell this. And why?
Yeah, she had already started playing around with some samples. She found a retired pattern maker who was living on Miami Beach, and she this pattern maker had actually worked in intimates before, so she had a treasure of one-off laces and fabrics and just beautiful materials. And she used to go to her house and they used to play around and make some samples. And then she would come to the office and she would show me. And I was like, oh my God, that is so nice. I love it. And there's nothing in the market at the time that looks remotely like it. And this was the days of the Victoria's Secret catalog. So everything was either sexy, sexy, sexy in your face, or just really plain,
wool,
basic, or even Calvin Klein,
yes.
Just almost nothing in between. And we just didn't identify with what was out there, and we really wanted things that were, pretty, that we would want to wear. And we just couldn't find them. And when Allie started playing around, she has honestly probably the best taste of anyone I know. And everything that she was, playing around with, she used to bring, and I'd be like, oh my God, I want it. And everyone in the office did too. It wasn't just me. It was okay, we were doing kind of a little bit of market research. And so, yeah, we just decided, we put together a very, very simple business plan and decided that there was space in the market, and we went for it.
Yeah, but let's talk a little bit about went for it. How did you get this produced and all the different sizes, and what was your market in terms of location? It's one thing to have a product, it's another thing to distribute it and then get paid for it.
Yeah, so this was 1996. There was still a tiny, tiny bit of an industry here in Miami, particularly in Hialeah. And we had no money. We literally had $20,000 for everything we were going to do. So we used to go to what's called jobbers, not even real, fabric mills. We used to go to jobbers. Jobbers are sort of warehouses of leftover fabrics, right? That designers or brands sell their leftovers to. So you can buy one roll of fabric, you can buy 2 rolls of fabric, but if you need to continue that fabric, you're done. It's one and done. So we used to go to jobbers and buy these fabrics. I had a little convertible car at the time, and we used to put the fabric rolls in, my car sticking out the roof. And we worked with a lot of, very, very small Miami fashion people, sometimes in their homes, sometimes it was little tiny factories, and we had stuff made. When we started, we thought that we wanted to be a catalog company. That was sort of the original business plan. And believe it or not, with $20,000, we actually made product, shot a catalog, hired a photographer, a model, printed, mailed, did the whole thing. And we got a 2% return, which was great, but we couldn't scale it because we had no money. So we were like, okay, we kind of have proof of concept, but we can't keep this thing going. So what are we going to do? There was no e-com at the time, right? 1996 was the days of dial-up. No e-commerce existed. So we started taking some of the things that we had already made to local stores here in Miami. One store in particular loved it, and she said, go ahead, bring me some, and we'll see what happens. On consignment. And it was the first and only time in 30 years that we did consignment business. But we did because we needed to try. She called us in a week. She said, I sold it all, bring me more. And we were like, okay, maybe we're on to something. So we packed our bags. We went to our first show, trade show in New York City. We set up a booth. Again, no idea what we were doing. When I say no idea, we didn't even know how to work a steamer. We had never even worked a day of retail in our lives, nothing. And we show up, and there are all these retailers coming around and looking at the collection, and we got quite a lot of interest. And 2 people wrote pretty significant orders. They're specialty stores, and 30 years later, they're still with us today.
That's
really
how we
great.
started. That's really great. And then the organization, though, it has to have also spread out right now from the 2 of you. What kind of a team do you have now? How do you manage the operation? And where are things getting manufactured these days?
All over. So, for quite a few years, it was just the 2 of us. And Allie was always, the sort of one who was in charge of product and design, and I was sort of in charge of everything else. So it was literally the days of picking up the phone and, good morning, accounting, please hold. Warehouse, how can I help you? That story, that was us. And of course, actually our very first hire was a warehouse guy, because up until then I was, packing all the boxes and sending everything out. I'll never forget, 10 years later, I went into the warehouse. I had to send out something personal, and I grabbed, the tape machine, and he's like, oh, I'll do that. He's like, you don't know how to do that. And I'm like, excuse me, who taught you? I'm like, some things you never forget. So we started, our very first hire was somebody in the warehouse, and then we started building out the team, very, very, very slowly, because again, we had no money. The little money that we had would go back into the business, because now we were like a legitimate wholesale business. And for wholesale, you have to buy product, right? And then oftentimes, you hold it or you ship it, but you don't get paid for 30, 60, 90 days. So we were always very cash strapped until, just recently, which we'll get into that a little bit later. Yeah.
Well, that will be great to hear about. Mm-hmm. But the business over 30 years has been through some pretty significant inflection points. And I know one of them that I brought up was, the pandemic must have been great for pajamas, right? I mean, everybody worked at home. And you had a different take on it, so I think they'd like to hear your take on that.
Yeah. So to answer your previous question more directly, now our team is about 100 people. So, everybody owns their functions, and it's a lot more fun for me, I think, not having to, be in the weeds every day of every single little
work
detail.
The mailroom.
Yes. But we had a really hard time during the pandemic. So what happened going into, I'll rewind a little bit. So in 2019, we started noticing that there were a lot of digitally native brands that were coming onto the market, and they were really starting to take a piece of the pie. And we were like, okay, they're all, backed by VC, and they're all pushing top line. We knew that none of them were making money, but regardless, they're taking market share, right? So we're like, at this point, we had been in business for about 25 years, and we just didn't want to let them kind of eat our lunch, right? So we were like, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to sort of rethink, everything, like our whole distribution strategy, our product strategy, our markets, like everything. So we actually hired an outside consultant for the first time. And right around this time, exactly at this time, in fact, in January of 2020, we were named as Brand of the Year at the biggest lingerie and sleepwear trade show in the world, which happens in Paris. And no US brand had ever been given this award or this honor. We were the first. So it was kind of a really big deal, both for us and for all of our customers, because remember, we were mostly wholesale at this time, right? So we were now like the top-selling brand at Saks and Neiman's and Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's, and we sold internationally as well. And we got this big award, and we all, we took the team to Paris. We celebrated. There was a big cat show celebration, and all out. That was January of 2020. So we were, on a super, super high. And then just a few months later, we, almost went out of business. We literally almost went bankrupt. And you can ask, how? Why? You guys made loungewear and pajamas, and everybody was home. Like, what are you thinking? It was, quite lucky, right? And only in retrospect will I say that, yes, we were quite lucky. But at the time, our business was 75% wholesale. So we only owned 25% of the direct business with our customer. 75% was wholesale. All the stores closed. They all stopped paying. They all canceled their orders. And remember that cash-strapped comment I made earlier? It nearly killed us. I mean, it was to the point where our head of finance or accounting would call me and say, we got a $500 check, and we would celebrate. It was like that bad. It was really, really bad. So after, we sort of figured out what we could do, what we couldn't do. Are you an essential business? You're not an essential business. Can you operate your warehouse? You have to social distance, this, that, blah, blah, blah. After all of that, we ended up moving out to a 3PL in the middle of the pandemic. It was like mayhem. But after all that, when the dust settled, we actually had, a lot of inventory. Some of our competitors did not because they were D2C. They didn't have the extra, inventory that we had from the department store businesses. And that's for the very first time when we really turned on the D2C machine. Up until then, we had been playing in e-commerce, but we always saw it as competing with our partners, right? Why are we going to go compete with Saks and Neiman's and Nordstrom and Amazon and all the people that sell us? We were like, we kind of have to pick a lane here. And we were wrong. We were really wrong. Once we saw what we could do in e-commerce, there was no going back. And we put all the resource behind, our e-commerce team, and with our consultant, we actually set up a plan to scale and a framework called Fewer, Bigger, Bolder. And I'm sure you all can imagine what fewer, bigger, bolder means, but it's basically the power of less versus the seduction of more. And we went through everything we did, every single thing we were doing in the business, down to SKU level. I mean, we looked at markets, we looked at SKUs, we looked at categories, we looked at channels, everything we did. And if something didn't meet what we call 3M, which is margin, momentum, and materiality, we killed it. We killed it. And we doubled down on where we were winning, and we were winning in pajamas. And we said, this is what our customer wants from us, and we have to stop chasing the, bright, shiny objects. We had a pretty big swim business at the time. I remember our head of wholesale nearly died when I told her we were letting go of swim. She was like, what do you mean? I can't sell more pajamas, instead of swimwear. It's different categories. And I was like, I know. But I guarantee that if we put all resource and focus behind pajamas, we will be able to sell more pajamas. She thought I was insane, but we tried it, and it worked. So today, and just, pandemic was what, 6 years ago, we've actually managed to flip the business model completely. Today, we're actually 80% direct to consumer between our retail stores and e-commerce, and the other 20% is wholesale. And by the way, our wholesale volume is still up to where it was, before the pandemic. So we've been able to really scale thanks to focus and discipline and getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats. And people who could help us scale and who had the skills to scale with this very new and different business model.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And the question that should have preceded that was, I was going to highlight that Angeles is very tech focused, and a lot of our investors are tech focused. So how do you integrate tech into Eberjey? And she's just told us, and that shift to digital is what did it, really. I think it's reassuring to many of the execs here that are in tech to see the value, because that was a total transformation of your business in probably didn't even take a year, because otherwise you would have been out of business. And it's just the power of what technology can do and the speed at which it can do it. It's an amazing story. And in the story, though, I think that you're underplaying a little bit your role. You were a 23-year-old. You wanted a business since you were 8. But all along, how did you enhance your personal skills to be able to run this and to scale it the way you have?
Yeah, I'm definitely a lifelong learner. I'm someone who is constantly seeking, to learn more. Like, I just think that if we don't keep learning, it's like we don't keep evolving, right? It's like, and if you don't keep evolving, what happens then? It's like there's only, there's only one outcome. So I do, love to learn. I said earlier, neither one of us went to design school or business school. I actually belong to YPO. Some of you may, know what that is. So through YPO, I go to Harvard every year. It's a 9-year program. I go to HBS. I'm on year 6 of 9. So that has helped me tremendously with leadership, because, not only was I 23, I never really worked anywhere. I had worked at one place for 1 year. Like, I didn't have examples of leadership. I didn't know what was good, bad, or indifferent. It was just how I led, right? But when you're a teeny tiny business, everyone you hire is sort of a generalist. Everybody has to do a little bit of everything, right? Everybody. It doesn't matter if you're, head of accounting, you also work on payroll, and you may have to pack boxes one day, and you may, right? Everybody does a little bit of everything. But as you grow and you start to be able to afford talent and subject matter experts, I always looked for people who were smarter than I am in their respective functions so that I could learn from them. And then what ended up happening is that I shifted from being a top-down leader when we were small, because when you're small, you kind of have to do that. You divide and conquer, right? It's like, okay, here, there's 5 of us. You do this, you do this, you do this, and I do that, right? But once you grow, it just becomes about co-creation. And with co-creation comes a lot of accountability, too. So it's actually a really good thing, right? If we're all creating this strategy together, and if we're all setting these goals together, and we each know what each one of us is accountable for, then it's like, it's not that it's no excuses, but we're all flying together, right? We're all going the same direction, and giving people true autonomy to do their jobs is something that I'm very proud of. It's like, you hire really good people, let them fly, let them do what they do. And of course there are things that they come to me for, and, I'm always there and I'm always present, but I'm definitely not a top-down leader anymore. And that was a huge transformation.
Wow. And then I think we have maybe one more comment here, but you did talk a little bit about almost running out of cash, bootstrapped. What do you think in retrospect? What's the right time to bolster your banking support and, possibly seek investment? As you look back, I know you did it without.
Yeah, I think looking back, look, our journey and our story happened the way it was meant to. I always say, half jokingly, but not really, that had we wanted to raise, no one would have given us money. Really, we had no idea what we were doing.
Okay, let me just say that's not true, but okay.
No, I honestly believe that, back then, right?
Oh, back then, yes.
Yeah, they would have been like, yeah, okay,
No, you're right about that. That's why we started this.
Yeah. So no one would have given us money back then, and we got to a point where we just got used to it. And being sort of scrappy served us, it allowed us to be super disciplined financially. We literally couldn't spend on anything that wasn't, there were no nice to haves. There were only must haves, and I think I partly still operate that way today, except that we're in a very, very different place. So one of the things that happened with our shift to e-commerce and retail is that our cash flow just, 10x'd overnight. And that was just year one, right? So now, we have, our balance sheet is actually super strong. We have the money to do what we need to do. We have the money to keep investing in the areas of the business that we want to invest in. And we just sort of missed that stage, that boat, where it was like, okay, we could have done it, but we didn't because we were just kind of chugging along. And then when it got to the pandemic and we were almost running out of money, that would have been the time. But not a lot of people were cutting checks in, March of 2020. And by May, we didn't need it anymore. Right. It was like,
That quick,
that Mother's Day, everybody was home and everybody was sending their moms Mother's Day gifts. And what did they want to send? Comfort, right? And here we were. We had been building this brand quietly for 20 years at that point. So when the customer, needed us, we were there. And it just switched overnight. It was incredible